Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to introduce a new sponsor to the podcast. Hillsdale College has been a longtime sponsor of the broadcast, and for the new year, they have graciously agreed to exclusively sponsor the first hour or segment of the podcast. I believe deeply in the principles and mission of Hillsdale College, which I share with you during the upcoming segment. My thanks and appreciation to Hillsdale College for their long partnership with the show, and now the podcast.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Well. More press, more disaster. You know, I was thinking about how to approach this. I've been invited on the Hannity TV show on Fox, and I'll be there 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I hope you'll join us. And I think a couple of subjects that'll probably come up are the media and what the media have done, and probably Alexandria. And so I want to address some of this with you, my beloved audience, first and foremost. Here's some of the fundamental problems I see with the American media. There are no uniform standards among news outlets, no clear line between news and opinion, no universal rules of professional conduct for journalists, no particular experience required. Look at Chuck Todd, Chris Cuomo, George Stephanopoulos. These are not professional newsmen. And no commitment to objectivity. You can hardly distinguish between news and opinion. The mass media is overwhelmingly left-wing and overwhelmingly pro-Democrat Party. I think this presidency has demonstrated that more than ever before. They hate President Trump. They hate his supporters. Even more broadly, they're very cynical about our founding principles, capitalism, national sovereignty. They love Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, 29 years old and dumb as a doorknob, but they keep promoting her. And I notice some conservatives do, too. The Obamas, Barack and Michelle, Bernie Sanders, leftists, democratic socialists and their agendas. They're very protective of them. They never really seriously question people who advance college for all, health care for all, a minimum income for all, and so forth and so on. So the result is what? Old-fashioned yellow journalism. It's an old term that applied to Hearst and some of the newspapers in New York that duked it out, and they had these very, broad headlines that would attract people's eyes. They were sensationalistic. They were scandal newspapers, and very unprofessional and very unscrupulous. So that's what we have today. Here's the problem. That First Amendment there is for a reason. It's not for Time Warner. It's not for Comcast. It's not for the New York Times Corporation or the Washington Post Corporation or any of the rest of them. It's for you and me. These entities didn't even exist when the First Amendment was adopted with the other 9. Freedom of speech and freedom of the press go hand in hand. And when you have almost a monopolistic pack mentality, groupthink, in the mass media, in the major media, it undermines a republic. Look at it as free speech. If speech pretty much only went one way, you wouldn't have a free society, now would you? The consequence is lousy reporting. Grabbing onto anything you can in order to besmirch your targets. Inaccurate reporting. And then when somebody calls you out, like the president or anybody else, you're said to be attacking freedom of the press. Actually, they're the ones destroying freedom of the press. The mass media are committed in this country to sabotaging this presidency, and that undermines this republic. I'm not talking about tough, aggressive reporting. I'm talking about advocacy. That's what I'm talking about. And so you have the BuzzFeed situation. You have the Covington situation. You have the Kavanaugh situation. You have endless false reporting about the president and Russia, about his children and Russia. And so they issue their apologies and their corrections, if they issue their apologies and corrections, and they move on. You look at lawyers, like them or not, there are rules of professional conduct. There are rules of professional conduct. You look at doctors, they have more tests and more requirements than any other profession. Electricians, in order to be licensed, plumbers, in order to be licensed, you have to know certain things. You have to practice certain things. There has to be standards. There has to be standards. We have standards throughout our society for all kinds of jobs. Some are white collar, some are blue collar, some are no collar. Except journalism. Journalism. You can come out of politics. You can come off a president's staff. You can come off Capitol Hill. And if somebody says you're a journalist or you're an anchor, then you're a journalist and you're an anchor. And what's lost in all this? Objectivity. Now, these people will self-servingly tell you that we can still be objective. But as they say, the proof is in the pudding, and they're not. The proof is in the pudding, and they're not. And so we get what we get. And in my view, we're back to yellow journalism. Or let me put it this way, and I think I'll say this on Hannity if I remember. The fourth estate has become the fifth column. The fourth estate, the media, has become the fifth column, undermining the country from within. That, in a thumbnail sketch, is what's taking place in this country, in my humble opinion. I hope these words are taken down by my friend at Right Scoop, by CR, and placed on their sites, because I feel this is fundamentally the issue. And the bias moves almost monopolistically in one direction. I'll give you an example. The Democrats demand 10 years of Donald Trump's tax returns. We hear this endlessly. Okay, what about 10 years of the Speaker of the House's tax returns? I mean, she's the Speaker of the House. She's in charge of legislation, appropriation bills that come out of the House of Representatives. How about 10 years of her tax returns and her husband? They're worth tens of millions of dollars. No. Why bother? Doesn't matter. You well know, you listen to this show and you watch other shows that have made the point of showing the hypocrisy, the flat-out hypocrisy of the Democrats on the issue of immigration over the years. How many of these media outlets have pointed that out? Maybe in passing. But when Nancy Pelosi says not $1 for the wall, why don't they show where Chuck Schumer and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama and down the list supported not $1 but $50 billion? When their favorite Democratic socialists come up with their cockamamie schemes of free health care, of free college, of a minimum government-subsidized income for every American, and their other schemes and plans, why don't the media talk about the debt that we have? Why don't the media talk about the impossibility of funding these projects? Why don't the media talk about how they'll bankrupt Medicare? But they don't. And they won't. Because they agree with the agenda. Because they're not seeking objectivity. In the least. And they're very tolerant of violence on the left. Antifa. They said very little about Antifa, maybe in passing here and there. Antifa is a violent left-wing militia, which trains its members to hurt people. And yet, the media had to be confronted by people like me, dragging and kicking, to acknowledge this fact. Martin Luther King's birthday was yesterday. One Democrat politician after another, and their surrogates, accused the president of being a racist, accused his supporter of being racists. This is on CNN and MSNBC. No pushback whatsoever. 63 million people voted for this president. 63 million people. He won the presidency. And yet he's a racist, and the people who supported him are racist. And the media are not only happy to report it, they promote it. And they continue to bring on, as contributors on cable news, people who make these statements. What about the growing hate and anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party, including among elected members? I've been banging that drum here for a long time now. And it's growing on the left. Big time, in a big way. How many news stories have been done on this subject on CNN and MSNBC, or anywhere for that matter, in the mass media? None? Maybe one? I know my buddy Hannity mentions it all the time on his Fox show. How about the newsrooms? How many newsrooms have done a story on that for any of the cable channels or any of the networks? Few, if any, as far as I can tell. How do we hold the media accountable? Well, ladies and gentlemen, there is a First Amendment. We do support the Bill of Rights. We do support our Constitution. And short of suing an organization or a particular reporter for libel, and if you're a public figure, that's a very high bar, given the Supreme Court decision in New York Times versus Sullivan. The only way you can hold the media accountable is to turn a blind eye to those organizations, the media corporations that disrespect you, that attack your values, that reject objectivity, and that are seeking to sabotage a duly elected president. You know which groups they are. You know which individual journalists they are. That's how we do it. And also by creating competition, whether on the internet or elsewhere. As technology changes, we embrace it and we use it to advance the cause of liberty. That word, liberty, that's what it's all about. And you'll never hear it on CNN, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, or NBC.
Mark Levin.
175 years. That's how long Hillsdale College has been around. As we start a new year, Hillsdale's entering its 175th year, but in all of that time, it still holds the same principles since 1844. The college was founded to teach students to seek truth, to recognize what is beautiful, and to hold up what is good. Most colleges have lost their way and are now in the grip of political correctness. They reject the idea of objective truth and peddle moral and cultural relativism. Not Hillsdale College. Hillsdale continues to provide sound learning essential to preserving civil and religious liberty. Hillsdale is my favorite college because it has stayed true to that mission and extends it nationwide on behalf of liberty. From its free online courses to its free speech digest and Primus, from training leaders at their Kirby Center in Washington, D.C., to helping establish classical K-12 charter schools nationwide, Hillsdale is educating Americans to restore our freedom, pursuing truth and defending liberty since 1844. This is Hillsdale College. Please visit hillsdale.edu to learn more. That's hillsdale.edu. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to do after the bottom of the hour, because there's not enough time now, I'm going to answer Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Rather than admiring her like more and more conservatives are doing, not agreeing with her, but admiring her. She's really tapped into the pulse. No, the media are promoting her. She's a 29-year-old know-nothing. She reminds me of the uninformed, sort of philosophical Marxists I went to college with. They were very, very easy to unravel. So we will unravel her. So, abandoning capitalism, you think that's a good idea? Upper marginal tax rates of 70%, you think that's a good idea? Eliminating billionaires, you think that's a good idea? Sure, sounds great, doesn't it? How about reparations? So many people have been so severely treated throughout our history. Reparations do too? Should we do all these things? Gee, we never heard of these things before, have we? All right, when we come back, I've had enough of this child congresswoman. I've had enough of her promotion. I've had enough of her socialist Marxist BS. She will not come on my program. She only goes on federal programs. So I will undo her agenda right here when we return. Don't miss it. Have you ever thought about the word education? It means to lead forth. Now let me tell you about a place that leads forth. Hillsdale College. At Hillsdale, students are challenged to discover the right way forth by reading the greatest books by the greatest minds in history. And they learn the meaning of the three ultimate and related things, the good, the true, and the beautiful. Now, unfortunately, many of our nation's other colleges have lost their way. Locked in the grip of political correctness, they no longer allow free and open discourse. Rejecting the idea of objective truth, they peddle moral and cultural relativism. But as we begin a new year, we can be thankful that none of this applies to Hillsdale College. For almost 2 centuries, Hillsdale has remained true to its original mission, to provide sound learning of the kind essential to preserving civil and religious liberty and intelligent piety. As Hillsdale enters its 175th year, it remains committed to offering its students the very best liberal arts education in the land, as well as to extending its mission nationwide through its many outreach efforts on behalf of liberty. These include free online courses, the publication of its free speech digest and Primus, its Kirby Center for Constitutional Studies and Citizenship in Washington, D.C., and its Barney Charter School Initiative, which is helping to establish classical K-12 charter schools nationwide, pursuing truth and defending liberty since 1844. This is Hillsdale College. Please visit Hillsdale. Go to hillsdale.edu to learn more. That's hillsdale.edu.
Yes, it's true that Mark Levin is the fastest growing radio show in America. The Mark Levin Show is on at 877-381-3811.
First, let me start this way with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and all the other budding socialists and Marxists. Let me take 5 of the wealthiest human beings ever. John D. Rockefeller, Sam Walton, Sam Weyerhaeuser, Bill Gates, Andrew Carnegie, Jeff Bezos. Why are they billionaires? Why are they billionaires? They changed the world. That's why they're billionaires. And I could name 1,000 more. Billionaires, multimillionaires. What did John Rockefeller do? He invented oil pipelines, whereas natural gas used to be burned off. Oil and natural gas were able to move all over the country and to fuel homes and to make all kinds of things possible, including heating your home during the winter, including later fueling your automobiles, your vehicles. Well, think about what you do with oil and natural gas today. And he helped fuel, if you will, the Industrial Revolution. Sam Walton. Well, you know what Sam Walton did. Walmart. How many people are and have been employed by Walmart? How many people are and have been employed in the oil industry? In every respect. Millions. Sam Weyerhaeuser, the biggest timberman, was a German immigrant into the United States. But cheap paper and toilet paper, you could thank him. He became a multi-billionaire. Bill Gates revolutionized computers with Microsoft. Andrew Carnegie, the mass production of steel. Look around you. Look around you, particularly in the metropolitan areas, if you reject capitalism. And Jeff Bezos revolutionized, in so many ways, how we purchase things. They're not just multi-billionaires, they're billionaires over and over and over again. Over and over and over again. When they look at Andrew Carnegie's wealth, based on current dollars today, it'd be $309 billion. John Rockefeller, $336 billion. And people hate them for it. I'm just naming a few. Bill Gates, $136 billion. Bezos is up there too. Similar amount of money. But the railroads, automobiles, Ford and others who followed, they created so many jobs and created a quality of life like no other place on the face of the earth. Other countries began to copy us. I give the example over and over again about going into a supermarket. Go into a supermarket. People of all faiths, colors, heights, sexual preference, doesn't matter, cares. And people of all income levels go into a supermarket. What do you see? Everything. Things that kings and queens of old could not even have imagined. We live better than kings and queens of old. With air conditioning, with heating, with running water, with electricity, lights, energy, mobility with automobiles, washers and dryers and dishwashers. We even have toasters for our bread, refrigerators and freezers. This is all a result of capitalism, people becoming enormously rich by providing us with what we need and want. They're not politicians. Hardworking Americans. They created these things. Look around you. Look at your home. The government didn't create that. Look at your television. The government didn't create that. Look at your computer. The government didn't create that. Look at your shoes. The government didn't create that. Your shirt, your pants, your belt, your dress. The government didn't create that. Your overcoat. The government didn't create that. The gloves you have. The government didn't create that. The silverware, so-called, in your home. Government didn't create that. All the appliances in your home, the government didn't create that. The roof over your head, the government didn't create that. The automobile you get into, the government didn't create that. The steering wheel, the transmission, the engine, all the parts, the government didn't create that. The tires, the government didn't create that either. Pull out your wallet, the government didn't create that. Your credit card, the government didn't create that either. Look around you. It's called liberty. It's called market capitalism. Look around you. The government didn't create any of it. It can't create any of it. Who's going to do it? Somebody at the Department of Agriculture? At the Department of Interior? At the Environmental Protection Agency? Who the hell in the government's going to do any of this? Nobody. So they want to take 70% from the billionaires. Let's say they took 70% from John Rockefeller in the day, or Sam Walton in the day, or Sam Weyerhaeuser in the day, or even Bill Gates today, or Andrew Carnegie in the day, or Jeff Bezos today. What do you think would happen? Think we'd create more wealth for more people, more jobs in this country? Are you kidding me? Look at them on Capitol Hill. Look at these fools who come on TV. The hell do they know how to do? They can't even pass a budget. They can't even balance our budget. They can't even secure the wall. Social Security's gone bankrupt. Medicare's gone bankrupt. And a 29-year-old says, I have the solution. And she spews illiterately Marxism. And everybody's blown away. Conservatives say, pay attention to her. She knows what she's doing, just like Donald Trump. She's nothing like Donald Trump. Donald Trump created tens of thousands of jobs. She's created nothing. Not one damn job. But she knows how to reorganize society. She's decided who will pay what. Look at your medicine cabinet. You have things in your medicine cabinet that they don't have anywhere else in the world. You can get your prescription brought to your home. You can even get it daily, broken down into what you need. You can get your prescription filled at a grocery store or a regular pharmacy. You can get it filled at a Walmart, a Costco. Look what's available to you. You complain about the cost? There are people around the world that would pay anything, for drugs that improve their lives, for insulin, for beta blockers. You name it. The vast majority of the world doesn't have access to these things. Some people argue over, as I say, some people argue, let's say, over vaccines. I'm not one of them, by the way, but some do. Well, the vast majority of the people of the world don't have access to vaccines. There's nothing to argue over. Nothing. We have a partial government shutdown where a percentage of the 25% of the government wasn't funded as shut down. I look at this. I say to myself, are they not familiar with the Depression? Are they not familiar with the Depression? What the Federal Reserve did to the dollar, which drove a recession into a depression. Government did that. And I hear people complaining. I don't know anybody who hasn't been unemployed or any small businessman who hasn't had a period of time, or woman, where they don't have the sales that they need to cover some costs. My parents went through that. I went through it many decades ago. And nobody ever said, but you know what? In a couple months, if you come back, a couple weeks, if you come back, we'll make it all up to you. You'll get all your money back. Nobody gave me my money back. I went through my pension. I went through all of our savings. I had to borrow money because I was going to get through it with the family, come hell or high water. And I'm certainly not alone. This is the experience of most Americans. But we're supposed to hate successful people, you see, because that's the only way socialism / Marxism / progressivism works. You have to destroy successful people because they're an example that the society works. These men that I've named are not billionaires because they stole from somebody. They're billionaires because they made a difference to you in your life. A huge difference. How about the money men, as we like to call them? You know, the Andrew Mellons of the world. Andrew Mellons of the world? They're financiers. But for Andrew Mellon, you wouldn't have electricity in your home. You aware of that? General Electric used to be called Edison Electric. Thomas Edison invented a form of electricity production. Tesla invented another form. Tesla's form was better. You're using it today. You've heard of Westinghouse. Well, Westinghouse was another big businessman. And he owned Tesla's patents. Well, Mellon, who didn't produce anything, was an investor. Well, he secured those patents in his own way from Westinghouse, who really didn't want to give them up. And, using Niagara Falls, among other places, crudely, but initially, created the process for the use of electricity on a massive scale. He became enormously rich. Tesla was relatively poor, and Westinghouse lost the patents. You have electricity thanks to what would be a multi-billionaire today. You see, billionaires selling to billionaires, it doesn't make a lot of money. They need the consumer. They need the American people. Same with pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies. They can spend 15 to 20 years and billions of dollars pursuing all kinds of drugs, trying to develop them to address all kinds of horrific diseases. Alzheimer's, various forms of cancer, and so forth. And most of the time they come up empty. So they have to spread the costs around, the R&D around, to the other prescriptions. That's what they do. We complain about that. We want the government to get involved. Well, who in the government do we want to get involved? Who should get involved? Somebody at the Department of Energy? Somebody at the Department of Education? I don't understand conservatives who want government, 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 and hate government, government, government. What is the government going to do? Well, they're going to stop price gouging. Nobody's gouged more than you by your government. You're gouged by your government. What do you get back 90% of the time? That's what they mean by redistribution of wealth, you know. You pay in and somebody else gets. They make political decisions, not economic decisions. They make political decisions, not decisions that are best for consumers. Look at immigration. They make political decisions, not decisions that are best for the American citizen. Now, with this very brief, minor course on macroeconomics, when we come back, I want you to listen to the 29-year-old socialist who's being promoted. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Our nation's oldest colleges were founded to teach students to seek truth, recognize what is beautiful, and hold up what is good. But the vast majority of them have abandoned their missions. Locked in the grip of political correctness, they no longer allow free and open discourse. Rejecting the idea of objective truth, they peddle moral and cultural relativism. Thankfully, none of this applies to Hillsdale College. For almost 2 centuries, Hillsdale has remained true to its original mission, to provide sound learning of the kind essential to preserving civil and religious liberty and intelligent piety. As Hillsdale enters its 175th year, it remains committed to offering its students the very best liberal arts education in the land, as well as to extending its mission nationwide through its many outreach efforts on behalf of liberty. These include free online courses, the publication of its Free Speech Digest and Primus, its Kirby Center for Constitutional Studies and Citizenship in Washington, D.C., and its Barney Charter School Initiative, which is helping to establish classical K-12 charter schools nationwide. Pursuing truth and defending liberty since 1844, this is Hillsdale College. Please visit hillsdale.edu to learn more. That's hillsdale.edu. Hillsdale.edu. Well, I used up too much time this hour, even though I was very succinct. If you ask me, very concise. to address Cortez. We can do that in the next hour. I hope you'll stay with me for that. You know, over the last couple of weeks, I've been talking with you about the cost of prescription drugs. I want to share some more facts with you, and I believe this is very important. Democrats in Congress are targeting the price of drugs and government-run health care as top legislative priorities for 2019, and some Republicans are willing to help them. And Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar has already unveiled plans to help the Democrats socialize drugs by importing foreign price controls and restricting Medicare beneficiaries from accessing certain drugs prescribed by their own doctors. But listen carefully to this, please. According to the White House's Council of Economic Advisors, the prices for prescription drugs, accounting for inflation, actually fell almost 3% over the last 12 months. Now, you have to wonder why Secretary Alex Azar is helping the Democrats socialize medicine. When his own administration reports that the market is working, drug prices are actually heading downward. Plus, ladies and gentlemen, if you want cutting-edge drugs to address some of the most horrific diseases that human beings get, we cannot have price controls and government price involvement. It'll be a disaster. Bernie Sanders, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, they love these sorts of plans. But everyone, every dictator, every socialist, they've all tried them. Socialized medicine gets the same results: scarcity, fewer choices, and worst of all, fewer life-saving breakthroughs. The real cost is in lives and the quality of life. I understand. I do. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez believes she can run the prescription drug industry. Does anybody know this guy who runs HHS? Of course not. Of course not. Government's too big. Government's out of control. Government regulates. But one thing government does not do is invent, create, produce. That's what the private sector's for. And no place more important than when it comes to pharmaceuticals. Check them out, truehealthfacts.com. Now stick with me for the next hour. We're going to play some of the 29-year-old. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Please don't forget, 2 hours, Sean Hannity's TV show on Fox. I will be on at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time. I hope you'll watch. I haven't been on the program in quite some time. The reason's multifold, but among other things, I'm working on my book, so it's difficult to handle all these things at once. But I hope you'll watch because I'm fired up. If he brings up Ocasio-Cortez, this is what I'm going to get into. I mean, in a very truncated form, obviously, given the format. We get into the media. I'm going to hammer that, so I think you're going to enjoy it very, very much, as I hope you do this radio program. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in New York City yesterday. She's being interviewed by Ta-Nehisi Coates. He's written a book that was a massive bestseller where he sees racism everywhere, Mr. Producer. White privilege everywhere. And so he interviews her. So I say she will not come on my program. But let's listen. Cut 6. This is from yesterday. Go.
When we talk about this conversation on marginal tax rates, it's an economic question, but it's also a moral question. It is the policy translation of a proposed answer to what kind of society do we want to live in. Are we comfortable with a society where someone can have a personal helipad while this city is experiencing the highest rates of people experiencing homelessness?
All right, stop. See, this is the problem. somebody can have a helipad and then we're experiencing homelessness. Now, if somebody doesn't have a helipad, will that reduce the homelessness rate? If somebody does have a helipad, will that increase the homelessness rate? There's no connection whatsoever. If you have $50,000 and the person down the street doesn't, if your $50,000 is taken from you, how does that help the person down the street? Or even if it's not taken from you, if you lose it, bad investment, how does that help the person down the street? A homelessness rate and somebody has a helipad. Now, we can get into the weeds a little bit here. Maybe we should. That means the person has a helicopter. She's taking a shot at Bloomberg, who she knows is going to run. I don't care for the man, but that's beside the point. He's got a helicopter. Maybe it's 20 of them. Why do I care? Does she know how a helicopter comes into existence, that it has to be manufactured? Does she know who manufactures helicopters? Hardworking, blue-collar, middle-class Americans? Does she know who the mechanics are on helicopters? Hardworking, blue-collar, middle-class Americans? These things create jobs. Redistribution of wealth does not create a job. It may create a temporary job, but it doesn't create permanent jobs. It's the government stepping in and deciding what happens. And wherever that happens, you have inefficiencies, you have poverty, and you have a building police state. And nobody ever asked this question. Where in the Constitution does the government have the power to do these things? Nowhere. That's how far we've dropped, we've fallen from constitutional republicanism. I mean, the revolution, really what triggered the revolution, there were a number of things built up and so forth, but it was the Stamp Act more than anything else in 1775. A tax on paper, which meant newspapers, which meant on any piece of paper and all and pamphlets and so forth. The Stamp Act. What do you think the revolutionaries, 1774, 5, 6, and so on, what do you think they would say about this? Absolute monarchy, tyranny, just in a different form. Jefferson used to talk about tyranny, and one of the things he would say, among others, is you can have legislative tyranny. That is tyranny by a legislature. Doesn't have to be a king. Doesn't have to be a group of people. It can be an elected legislature. This is why, ladies and gentlemen, we're not a small d democracy. We're not a populist nation. We're a republic. We're constitutionalists. People read these polls on TV, particularly of the left, and they say, see, there's a majority of Americans who believe that the 70% tax rate should be applied to this. That's not the test. They're private property rights. Somebody has a helipad, and we are experiencing homelessness as bad as since the Great Depression. Well, of course, she's a liar. And one of the ways you reduce it, by the way, is securing your border so the poorest of the poor aren't pouring into your country and moving into our cities. But they don't want to hear that. They don't want to. The population is changing. There's millions and millions of foreigners here who are here illegally, who are in the quote-unquote shadows. And so it's a heavy economic drag on a city, on a community, on a state. But you're not allowed to talk about that. So that person who has a helipad and a helicopter, they're not taking anything from anybody. In fact, they're creating jobs. And that person who has a helicopter may be an individual who employs 5, 10, 20,000 people, all of whom have families, all of whom are fed, all of whom pay taxes. So what's wrong with that? Go ahead.
Should those two things coexist at the same time?
Should those two things coexist at the same time? This is a police state fascistic mentality. And that's where they have to go, the democratic socialists, when they reveal themselves. She's not a particularly articulate democratic socialist. And so she says, should those two things coexist at the same time? In other words, ladies and gentlemen, should successful people and unsuccessful people coexist at the same time? This is like Castro-like speak. And I want to remind you, when Castro was 29, just like she is, he took over Cuba and made it a disaster. And incidentally, I've never seen a dictator like Castro who's poor. Have you? They talk about communism and socialism and, oh, look at the heliport and this and that and the other. None of them are poor. Maduro's worth billions. Chavez before him was worth billions. The Castros are worth billions. This guy Xi in China, anything and everything he wants, he's worth billions. Any form of autocracy, they can call it communism or whatever. And the reason why communism, more than even fascism, certainly in the last half century or so, has more appeal. Because the communists, Marx figured out that you take authority, you centralize government, you create a police state, although they wouldn't admit it, while claiming to do so on behalf of the people. And you create enemies. Like the guy with the helipad, he's an enemy. Well, what if that guy with the helipad was a billionaire who started out in his garage, a scientist who created a life-saving drug, or something you must want, or he wouldn't be a billionaire, she wouldn't be a billionaire. What's wrong with that? Go ahead.
I think a 70% marginal tax rate, especially when we're starting to talk about your $10 millionth, your 10 millionth and $1, all of those.
Your 10 millionth dollar. Well, what if I need $20 million to start a business? What if I need that extra bunch of dollars after my 10 millionth dollar to pay my employees? Or what if I invented something and I want to keep my money because I want to invent other things? What's this magic number? It's like the $15 minimum wage. Where does that come from? Well, it just comes from leftists, and they keep demanding it. They have their catchphrases, their fortune cookies. They have their... Either the 10 millionth dollar, we're just taxing 70% tax rate, and where's the money go? It goes into the massive federal Leviathan slush fund. And where's the constitutional basis for this? Well, there's a progressive income tax. Well, there's also private property rights. Now, also, unintended consequences, unless you actually know what you're talking about, how many people who earn over $10 million, doesn't mean they get to keep it, but earn over $10 million, have small businesses or entrepreneurs or whatever, doesn't matter, say, you know what? I'm giving up. I'm not paying 70 cents out of every dollar after $10 million. Screw it. I'm not hiring any more people. I'm not expanding my business. I'm closing it down. I'm retiring to Florida. Well, that'd happen, you know. Some people are working hard. They're working hard because they want to make money. They want to expand their business. They say, you know what? Forget it. I'm done. I'm done. We have a poll now, thanks to the media. 74% of Democrats and people who lean Democrat would consider voting for Ocasio-Cortez if she were old enough to be president. That is 35. She's 29. This is a media creation. Now let's go on to cut 7, Mr. Producer. Go.
I hate to personalize this, but do you think it is moral for individuals to, for instance, do we live in a moral world that allows for billionaires? Is that a moral outcome?
Now, let's stop. So now you see the socialist communist position, a.k.a. the progressive position, is the moral one. And if you don't embrace it, you're immoral. So if you believe in capitalism, wealth creation, which leads to job creation and so forth, it does every time. Well, Mark, what about people who inherit money? What do you think they do with that money? Burn it? Put it in their mattress? Let's say they leave it in bonds and stocks or they put it in a bank account. What happens to that money? Anybody know? Other people use it. Maybe they borrow the money. Maybe other companies use it to expand. It doesn't just sit there. Money's like water. Doesn't just sit there. It's put to some use. Unless you stick it in your closet or something like that. Money creates money. Doesn't mean for every person, but it means for the economy generally. So now the question is, ladies and gentlemen, is it moral to be a capitalist? Is it moral to be successful? Is it moral to create wealth for yourself and other people? Is it moral to be an incredibly successful entrepreneur? Is it moral? You see, because after all, those of you who don't agree with them, you're racists, you're homophobes, and you're immoral. Go ahead.
It's not. It's not. And it's not. And I think it's important to say that I don't think that necessarily means that all billionaires are immoral.
Well, wait a minute. Wait. Immorality has nothing to do with earning money, saving money, so forth. And immorality has to do with doing something, to use a word to define a word, immoral. These people who don't want the Ten Commandments anywhere are now telling us that their ideology is morality, and if you don't embrace it, you're immoral. Go ahead.
To say that someone like Bill Gates, for example, or Warren Buffett are immoral people, I do not believe that. But I believe
that he kicks his dog.
Right?
Like
yeah, I don't. I'm not saying that, but I do think a system that allows billionaires to exist when there are parts of Alabama where people are still getting ringworm because they don't have access to public health is wrong.
Oh, I see. Now, ladies and gentlemen, is anybody stopping the government from borrowing money? Is anybody stopping the government from spending money? The tax rates don't even equate with government spending. We're running nearly $1 trillion a year deficit, adding to a $22 trillion fiscal operating debt, adding to a $250 trillion unfunded liability problem. Is there a spending problem? Is there a borrowing problem? Am I missing something? So if we eliminate all billionaires, we eliminate all their wealth, that doesn't mean the person with ringworm in Alabama, a little stereotypical, don't you think, won't have ringworm in Alabama. They may still have ringworm in Alabama, or Queens, or Brooklyn, or the Bronx, or Manhattan, or Long Island, or Staten Island, or anywhere. One has nothing to do with the other. Indeed, the billionaires who created Walmart make it possible for somebody to go into Walmart where they can get right off the shelf a cure for ringworm at a very low price. Or to go on Amazon, another billionaire, and have it delivered to their home. Or they can get in their car, invented by other billionaires, and drive to a public health facility to address their ringworm problem. All kinds of billionaires have created all kinds of stuff. Is there somebody, by the way, in this country with a ringworm problem that can't get help by walking into an emergency room? And every single pharmaceutical company has a special program for poor people, every one of them, where they can get free medicine if they can demonstrate that, in fact, they're as poor as they say they are. So they create this picture of this super wealthy society and this destitute society. And the answer, of course, is to destroy success, destroy private property rights, destroy capitalism, just more government. That's the answer. Tell me, in the bluest of blue states, do people have ringworm? I guess they do. They have a big homeless problem in New York City, and you're paying taxes through the wazoo. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Baseball today. It's the American way. Of course, the next best thing to a seat in the stands is a seat in front of a 19-inch RCA Victor television. One more day to Labor Day weekend, the traditional occasion for tasty outdoor barbecues or picnics.
Agree with all the obstacles and with all the enemies who are between me and
you.